Story 1. The bedroom that wasn't yours. The moving truck rumbled away, leaving Clara standing in the driveway with her backpack clutched against her chest. Her mother, Julie, was already halfway up the front steps, smiling nervously at the man waiting by the door. "Come on, sweetheart," she called. "Say hello to your new home." Clara didn't answer. She just stared at the house, tall, white, and too perfect, like it had been pulled from a brochure. The shutters were painted a soft blue. The garden smelled like roses. But something about it felt wrong. The windows, tall and narrow, reflected the sky in dull gray instead of blue. Her new stepfather, Richard, opened the door. He was all politeness, handsome, with dark hair and a voice so calm it almost sounded rehearsed. "Welcome home," he said, bending slightly to meet her eyes. "I've got something special for you upstairs." Clara followed them inside. The house smelled faintly of wood polish and flowers, the kind of smell that tried too hard to feel inviting. Every surface gleamed. Family portraits lined the hallway, though every frame had only two people, Richard and Julie. None included Clara. "Your room's at the end of the hall," Richard said, motioning up the stairs. "We redecorated it just for you." When the door opened, Clara's breath caught. It was like stepping into a dollhouse. The walls were painted blush pink. Lace curtains framed the windows. A white vanity stood by the corner with a mirror, so clean it seemed to glow. Stuffed animals filled the bed, soft rabbits, bears, and dolls with glassy eyes that caught the light just enough to look alive. Julie beamed. "Isn't it lovely, honey?" Richard picked everything himself. Clara forced a small smile. "It's nice." But it didn't feel nice. The air inside the room was heavy, like it had been shut for too long. There was a faint scent of roses, yes, but beneath it, something metallic, something old. That night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling. Somewhere beneath the hum of the air conditioner, she heard something else, a low vibration, like the walls themselves were humming softly. She pressed her ear to the wall. The sound deepened, rhythmic. It almost sounded like a heartbeat. "Mom," she whispered, but her voice barely carried. The next morning, when she woke up, the toys on her dresser were in a different order. The teddy bear she'd left sitting upright was now lying face down. The little porcelain doll had been moved to the vanity. She asked her mother about it over breakfast. "Did you go in my room last night?" Julie frowned. "No, honey." "What?" The toys moved. Richard looked up from his paper and smiled faintly. "Maybe you did it in your sleep." Clara shook her head. "No, I don't sleepwalk." "Then maybe the dolls just wanted a change of scenery," he said softly. I still fixed on her. Her mother laughed awkwardly, brushing it off, but Clara didn't. A week passed. Every night, the hum returned. Every morning, the toys were different. Sometimes the dolls faced her bed, staring straight at her. Sometimes the mirror on the vanity was fogged, as if someone had breathed on it, except it wasn't cold. Then came the whispering. It was faint at first, like the sigh of wind slipping under a door. But soon, she began to make out words. "Get out. Go away. My room." The voice was small, childlike, a girl's voice. It always came from the corner near the vanity, right where the mirror stood. Clara tried to tell her mother again, but Julie only smiled tiredly. "Honey, you've been through a lot. A new house, a new family. Maybe your imagination's just running wild." Richard's expression didn't change. "I think she'll get used to it," he said. Eventually, one night, Clara woke up to the whisper again, but this time it was closer. "Get out of my room." Her breath caught. The air had turned icy. She could see it. Her own breath, faint puffs of white in the dark. She turned toward the vanity. The mirror wasn't fogged this time. It was clear, and behind her reflection stood another girl. Same height, same hair, same pajamas. But the other girl's eyes were wide, dark, and full of hate. Clara screamed. Within seconds, the door burst open. Her mother came rushing in, followed by Richard. The lights flipped on. The mirror was normal again. "What's wrong?" Julie gasped. Clara pointed to the mirror. There was a girl. She was me. Julie's face softened with pity. "Oh, sweetheart." Richard knelt beside the bed. "This was my daughter's room before you," he said quietly. "She didn't like to share." Clara froze. "What?" He stood up, brushing invisible dust from his sleeve. "Go back to sleep. You'll be fine." And with that, he turned off the light and closed the door. The next day, Clara went exploring while her mother was out grocery shopping. She waited until Richard left for work, then crept up to the attic, a narrow wooden staircase behind a small door in the hallway. Dust floated in the light from a single window. The attic was filled with boxes, some labeled Christmas, some books, and one at the far end labeled in faded marker, Emily's room. She pried it open. Inside were toys, old, cracked porcelain dolls, a pink hairbrush, a pair of children's shoes. Beneath them, a stack of photographs. Her heart thudded as she lifted the top one. A girl sat on the same pink bed she now slept in. The same wallpaper, same curtains. But what made Clara's stomach twist was how much the girl looked like her. Same brown eyes. Same freckles. Even the same slight curl at the ends of her hair. On the back of the photo was a date, June 12, 2009. 5 years before Clara was born. She flipped through the others. Each one showed the same girl, sometimes smiling, sometimes serious, sometimes holding a stuffed rabbit that now sat in Clara's room. The last photo was different. It showed an empty bedroom. No girl. No toys. Just the bed and the mirror, slightly fogged. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house made her flinch. At midnight, she heard it again, the humming in the walls, the whispering near the vanity. But this time, it wasn't just one voice. It was two. The second sounded like her own. Clara sat up, trembling. "Who are you?" she whispered. The room went silent. Then, softly, "I'm you." The mirror rippled. Not fog this time. It moved like water. Clara stumbled out of bed, backing away. The reflection inside didn't match her movements anymore. The other girl stepped closer, placing a hand against the glass. "Why are you here?" The reflection whispered. "It's my room." Clara ran to the door. It wouldn't open. She yanked harder, panic rising. "Mom!" she screamed. No one answered. Behind her, the glass began to crack. Lines spread across the surface, thin as spider webs, glowing faintly pink under the nightlight. The voice hissed again. "Get out!" With a loud shatter, the mirror broke. Clara ducked, shielding her face, but when she looked up, there was no glass on the floor, only silence. The reflection was gone. The next morning, Richard was waiting at the table. "Did you sleep well?" he asked calmly. Clara didn't respond. He smiled faintly. "Good. You'll get used to her." That day, Clara begged her mother to move. "Please, Mom. Something's wrong here." Julie frowned. "Clara, stop. You're upsetting Richard. He's trying so hard." He said his daughter didn't like to share. Her mother froze. "Richard never had a daughter." Clara stared at her. "What?" Julie sighed. "He was married before." "Yes, but they never had children. She died years ago." That night, Clara went to bed with her lamp on. Around 2 a.m., the hum started again, but louder this time. The air grew heavy. The lamp flickered, and then the mirror reappeared. Whole again. Except now, her reflection was smiling. "Mom?" she whispered, stepping closer. Her reflection tilted its head. "Mom." The reflection mouthed something. "Mine." The mirror fogged over completely. Clara backed away. The room went cold, so cold her breath came out in white puffs. The dolls on the bed turned one by one, their eyes glinting. She tried to scream, but no sound came. Then, a hand, small and pale, pressed against the other side of the glass. Another. Then a face. Her own face. The reflection opened its mouth and spoke in her exact voice. "You took my place." The mirror burst outward. Clara fell back, shards scattering across the floor. When she looked up, the other girl was standing there, dripping water, her skin gray and cracked like old porcelain. "Give it back," the girl whispered. What? Clara stammered, crawling backward. "My room. My bed. My mother." Julie's voice came from the hallway. "Clara? What's happening?" The ghost turned toward the sound. "She's not yours," it hissed. "She's mine." Julie appeared at the door. Her eyes widened. "Oh my God!" The lights exploded. When they came back on, the room was still. Julie was on the floor, unconscious. Richard rushed in seconds later, kneeling beside her. He glanced at the mirror, now cracked again, but empty. "Where's Clara?" he asked. There was no answer. Only the faint hum of the walls. Julie stirred weakly, eyes fluttering open. She was right here. Richard helped her up. "You're just disoriented. Come on, let's get you downstairs." As they left, The vanity mirror flickered once more. Two girls stood inside, one smiling, one pounding silently against the glass. The reflection whispered through the hum of the walls. "This was my room before you." Story 2. Dinner with the Stepfather. When Olivia's mother announced she was remarrying, it didn't come as a shock. Her father had been gone for years. One of those quiet departures no one talks about, just a suitcase left by the door and a note that said, "It's better this way." Olivia had watched her mother struggle to keep their small life intact, working double shifts, pretending not to cry when bills stacked up. So when Mark entered their lives, a man with perfect posture, a neatly trimmed beard, and a voice that could charm anyone, her mother melted. He was stability, security, a new start. At first, Mark seemed like everything her mother needed. He cooked, cleaned, and smiled warmly whenever he caught Olivia's eye. "You'll see," her mom said, wrapping her arm around him one night. "He's going to make this family whole again." But there was something strange about him from the very beginning. He insisted they eat dinner together every night. No excuses, no delays. He'd set the table himself, carefully aligning each fork and knife, placing the wine glasses at perfect angles. The menu never changed: steak, mashed potatoes, red wine. Every single night. Tradition, Mark said with a smile when Olivia asked about it. Family meals should remind us of who we are. The first time Olivia took a bite, she noticed how tender the meat was, soft, almost too soft, like it melted in her mouth. Mark watched her closely as she chewed, his smile widening when she swallowed. "Good, isn't it?" he asked. She nodded, not wanting to offend him. But she could never shake the feeling that his eyes lingered too long, like he was waiting for something. The house itself didn't help either. It was an old colonial that Mark claimed had been in his family for generations. The walls creaked with every breath of wind. The lights flickered no matter how many times an electrician came. And sometimes, late at night, Olivia could hear a faint scraping sound from the basement. Metal on stone, rhythmic, like someone sharpening a blade. She told her mother about it once, but her mom just smiled wearily. "Mark says it's the pipes. Don't worry so much, sweetheart." But Olivia couldn't stop worrying. Not after the night she spilled her wine. It was during one of those perfect dinners. Mark was laughing, his deep baritone filling the room, when Olivia's hand accidentally nudged her glass. The dark red liquid cascaded across the tablecloth, pooling beside her plate. She jumped up, panicking, and grabbed a napkin to blot it up. As she leaned over, her eyes caught his reflection in the spill. For a split second, she froze. His eyes, those normally calm, calculating blue eyes, were black, pitch black, like two holes punched into reality. And in them, she saw movement. Shapes. Shadows writhing, hungry. When she looked up, his face was normal again. He was smiling gently, handing her another napkin. "Careful," he said softly. "Red stains easily." That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake in her room, staring at the ceiling, trying to tell herself she'd imagined it. But around midnight, the smell hit her, the same smell that clung to her stepfather's apron after dinner. Raw meat. Metallic. Sweet and foul all at once. She slipped out of bed, her bare feet silent against the hardwood floor. The house was dark, except for a faint light coming from the kitchen. The closer she got, the stronger the smell became. When she peered around the corner, she froze. Mark stood at the counter, his shirt off, muscles tensing under the yellow light as he carved something large on the wooden board. The sound of the knife was soft and wet, the scrape of bone audible even under his low humming. At first, Olivia thought it was just meat from the freezer. But then she saw it, a hand. Small, delicate. A woman's. Her mother's. The diamond bracelet her mom always wore dangled limply from the wrist, smeared with blood. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. She backed away slowly, careful not to make a sound. But the old floorboards betrayed her. A single creak echoed like thunder. Mark stopped humming. The knife froze mid-slice. "Olivia," he said gently, without turning around. She didn't move, didn't breathe. He slowly turned his head, and for the first time, she saw him for what he really was. His pupils were gone, his eyes completely black, veins crawling across his face like cracks in porcelain. Blood streaked his chin. He smiled, teeth slick with red. She wanted to be part of the family forever, he whispered, holding up the piece of flesh. "And she will be." Olivia screamed and bolted for the door, but he was faster. His hand clamped around her wrist, cold and strong. "You don't understand," he hissed. "Family isn't chosen. It's consumed." She wrenched free and stumbled toward the stairs, heart pounding. Behind her, she heard him laughing, a low, echoing sound that didn't belong to a man. She ran into her room and slammed the door, pushing her dresser against it. For hours, she sat trembling in the dark, listening to the sound of his footsteps pacing the hallway. By morning, he was gone. So was her mother. The police searched the house after Olivia finally escaped to a neighbor's, hysterical and covered in blood. They found no sign of Mark. No fingerprints, no footprints, no trace of him ever existing. The kitchen was spotless, the counters gleaming as if freshly polished. The only thing they did find was the bracelet, perfectly cleaned, placed neatly on Olivia's pillow. Years later, when Olivia was in college, she received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single photograph, a family dinner. Her mother, smiling. Mark, sitting beside her. And Olivia, younger, laughing. But it wasn't from any dinner she remembered. Her mother's eyes were hollow, her skin pale. And on the table before them, the meat on their plates looked disturbingly human. Underneath, written in neat handwriting, were 3 words: dinner, tomorrow night. Story 3, The Stepmother's Garden. When Ethan's father remarried, everything changed overnight. The small, quiet apartment he'd shared with his dad was replaced by a sprawling countryside home, the kind of place people in storybooks called quaint, but that, in real life, felt suffocatingly still. And then there was Nora, his new stepmother. She was beautiful in a way that didn't feel real. Her hair was always perfectly brushed, her skin never seemed to age, and her smile, though warm, never quite reached her eyes. But what Ethan remembered most about her was the garden. It stretched behind the house like a living labyrinth, rows of vibrant flowers, creeping vines that tangled around white trellises, and colors so bright they seemed unnatural. The air there always smelled heavy, sweet, and faintly metallic, like overripe fruit mixed with something that didn't belong. Nora loved that garden more than anything else. She spent hours out there every day, sometimes before dawn, sometimes long after sunset, tending to the plants, pruning, humming softly under her breath. When Ethan's dad asked what she was growing, she'd smile and say, "Just what the earth gives me." But Ethan noticed something strange. She never planted anything new. She never brought home seeds or fertilizer, yet the garden flourished endlessly. And sometimes, at night, he could swear he heard whispers drifting through his open window, the rustle of leaves and a faint voice that sounded almost human. One afternoon, when his father was away on business, Ethan worked up the courage to ask her. "Why do you talk to the plants?" he said. Nora looked up from a patch of deep red lilies, brushing dirt from her gloved hands. "Because they listen better than people do," she replied softly. "And they remember, too." He didn't know what she meant by that, but the way she said it made him shiver. That night, curiosity got the better of him. He crept out of bed and tiptoed to the back door, the boards creaking beneath his bare feet. The moon hung low over the garden, casting everything in a pale, silvery glow. From the distance, he saw her, kneeling by a flower bed, her hair hanging loose, her hands pressed against the soil. Ethan crouched behind a bush, holding his breath. She was whispering, but the words weren't like anything he'd ever heard. They were low, rhythmic, almost like a lullaby sung backward. Then, slowly, she pressed her palm into the earth. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ground shifted. Ethan's heart nearly stopped when something pale pushed through the dirt. A small hand, white and childlike, fingers twitching as if waking from sleep. Nora smiled, her expression serene. "Time to feed the roots," she whispered. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out something dark, a small shape wrapped in cloth, and gently placed it into the waiting hand. The soil swallowed both, closing silently as if nothing had happened. Ethan ran back to his room, trembling so hard he could barely breathe. He wanted to tell his dad, but what could he say? That his new wife was feeding something buried in the garden? He'd just think it was a nightmare. The next morning, the local news was buzzing. A boy from 2 streets over had gone missing on his way home from soccer practice. Search parties combed the neighborhood, Police dogs sniffed through the woods, and everyone's faces tightened with worry. Everyone except Nora. She just smiled as she trimmed her roses, humming softly. Over the next few weeks, more kids disappeared. Always from nearby. Always when the moon was full. Ethan stopped going outside. He kept his curtains closed and refused to look at the garden, but he could still hear it. At night, the soft rustling, the wet sound of roots shifting beneath the earth. Once, he swore he heard a child crying beneath his window. When he peeked outside, the sound stopped, replaced by the faint sway of flowers in the wind. Then, one day, Nora vanished. No one knew where she went. The police found her car at a gas station 20 miles away, her purse still inside. Her husband, the man who had once been Ethan's whole world, fell into silence. He never spoke about her again. Within a year, he sold the house, and they moved. Ethan thought that was the end of it. He tried to forget the garden, the missing children, the way the soil seemed to breathe. He grew up, moved to another city, built a new life. But the dreams never stopped. Dreams of flowers that whispered his name. Dreams of roots curling around small, pale bones. 20 years later, after his father's death, Ethan found himself driving down the old road again. The house had been abandoned for years, the garden left to rot. Yet when he stepped out of the car, the scent hit him, strong and sweet, the same heavy perfume he remembered from childhood. The garden was alive. Overgrown, tangled, wild, but still impossibly vibrant. The colors pulsed under the dim light, the flowers swaying as if in greeting. Drawn by something he couldn't explain, Ethan walked to the center, where a tree now stood. Its bark was dark and glossy, its branches thick with red blossoms that dripped a syrupy liquid onto the ground. He reached out to touch it, and froze. The roots. They twisted across the soil like veins, thick and pale, almost like tendons. Some had shapes, fingers, joints, faint impressions of faces stretched beneath the bark. And carved into the trunk were names. Hundreds of them. He stepped closer, heart hammering as he read. Names of the missing children. Names from old news reports. Then, his father's. And finally, near the base of the tree, barely visible under layers of rough bark, his own name. Ethan stumbled back, his throat closing. The wind picked up, and the branches rustled overhead, whispering like hundreds of tiny voices all at once. He turned to run, but the ground beneath him shifted, softening like wet clay. The soil clung to his shoes, pulling him down. He fell to his knees, clawing at the earth as something cold and slick wrapped around his ankle. A hand, small, childlike, burst through the dirt, grabbing his leg. Then another, and another. Dozens of them. From beneath the surface came a sound, faint but growing louder, the same lullaby he'd heard all those years ago. And through the whispering leaves, a voice drifted, calm and familiar. "Welcome home, Ethan." He looked up. Nora stood at the edge of the garden, her dress tattered, her skin pale as moonlight, her eyes glowing faintly green. In her hand, she held a small trowel, glistening with dark soil. "It's time," she said gently, kneeling beside him. The garden's been waiting. The roots tightened around him, dragging him downward. The last thing he saw before the soil closed over his face was Nora's smile. The same soft, patient smile she'd always worn, as she whispered, "Now you'll feed the roots too." Story 4, The Wedding Gift. When Ava's father announced he was getting remarried, she tried her best to be happy for him. He'd spent years alone after her mother's death, and he deserved love again. That's what everyone told her, love again. But something inside her tightened when she met Elise, the woman who would become her new stepmother. Elise was elegant, graceful, almost too perfect. Her eyes were a shade of green that caught the light like glass, and she spoke with a voice that was soft and musical. From the moment Ava met her, she noticed how Elise never seemed to blink for long, how her smile lingered even when her eyes didn't move. The wedding took place in a small garden behind an old estate. The flowers were pale and heavy with scent, bending toward the ground as if burdened by their own beauty. Elise wore a white gown that shimmered faintly in the sunlight, though, as Ava would later remember, it didn't seem to shine with the light but against it, as if it reflected something deeper and darker. After the ceremony, when the guests had gone and her father had disappeared into conversation with family, Elise approached Ava with a smile. For you, she said, holding out a small box wrapped in white lace. Ava turned it over in her hands. It was light, delicately carved from dark wood, and it smelled faintly of rose and smoke. What is it? Ava asked. Elise's smile deepened. A family tradition. Something every daughter receives on her wedding night, or when she joins a new family. Ava unwrapped the lace. Inside the box, cushioned by a layer of silk, was a lock of hair tied with a pink ribbon. Human hair. Blonde, soft, and perfectly trimmed. Ava looked up. Whose is it? Elise's eyes flickered briefly, almost like the reflection of a flame. It belonged to someone I loved very much. And now it's yours. You'll add your own someday. Ava forced a small laugh, uncertain whether to be touched or unsettled. That's nice, I guess. Elise reached out and tucked a strand of Ava's brown hair behind her ear. Traditions keep families close, she said softly. Sometimes closer than we think. That night, Ava dreamt of a girl sitting in a dark room, holding the same wooden box. The girl's face was pale, streaked with tears, her mouth moving soundlessly. Around her were hundreds of locks of hair, some blonde, some brown, some black, strewn across the floor like cobwebs. The girl clutched the box tightly to her chest and whispered, "She's still hungry." When Ava woke up, her heart was pounding. She brushed her hair back and froze. There was a small, bald patch near the crown of her head. The hair had been cut, cleanly and evenly, as if by scissors. She checked her pillow. No scissors. No fallen strands. Just that faint smell of rose and smoke lingering in the air. At breakfast, Elise hummed as she prepared tea. Ava sat quietly, tugging her hood up to hide the missing patch. "Sleep well?" Elise asked, her tone light. Ava hesitated. "I think someone was in my room." Elise smiled without looking up. Dreams can be strange when you're adjusting to a new home. After that, Elise began brushing Ava's hair every night. She'd sit behind her on the edge of the bed, humming that same low tune as the brush moved through Ava's hair with slow, careful strokes. Sometimes, Ava thought she heard her whispering, soft words that didn't sound like English, more like a chant. When strands fell loose, Elise would pick them up, wrap them around her fingers, and tuck them into her apron pocket with gentle precision. When Ava asked what she was doing, Elise said, "It's just to keep them safe." You'd be surprised how much of yourself can live inside a single strand of hair. Weeks passed. The dreams continued, each more vivid than the last. The crying girl appeared again and again, her voice growing stronger. "She's taking us," she said one night. "She feeds on what we leave behind." Then the box began to change. At first, Ava noticed tiny new details she hadn't seen before, like faint carvings along the sides. When she held it under the light, the patterns looked like vines or roots, twisting around faces that looked like children's. Then, one morning, she woke to find the box slightly open on her nightstand, though she was sure she'd locked it. Inside, nestled among the hair, was something new, a small, white fingernail. Ava slammed it shut, her stomach twisting. That evening, she confronted Elise. "What is this?" she demanded, holding the box in front of her. "There's something inside that shouldn't be." Elise didn't flinch. Her eyes glimmered faintly as she said, "Sometimes what we love most sheds a little piece of itself. We collect those pieces to keep them close. That's what family does." "That's sick," Ava whispered. Elise smiled thinly. "You'll understand soon enough." That night, Ava woke suddenly, her room dimly lit by moonlight filtering through the curtains. She couldn't move. Her limbs felt heavy, locked in place. Panic rose in her chest as she realized she was completely paralyzed. She heard the soft creak of the door opening. Elise stepped inside, her nightgown trailing across the floor. In her hands was the wooden box. Ava tried to scream, but no sound came. Elise approached slowly, her face serene. "You've been such a lovely daughter," she whispered. "So full of life. So full of light. It's time you gave a little of it back." She opened the box. Inside was no longer just a lock of hair. It was filled with flesh, thin, papery layers of skin, tiny crescent-shaped nails, and something in the center that pulsed faintly, like a small, beating heart. It glowed faintly red, casting Elise's face in an otherworldly hue. "This is how we stay together," Elise murmured, brushing a strand of hair from Ava's forehead. "A piece of you, a piece of me. Shared. Eternal." Ava could feel something being pulled from her scalp, a tight, burning sensation, followed by the faint sound of cutting. She wanted to cry, to thrash, to run, but her body refused to move. Elise gathered the strands of her hair, placed them delicately into the box, then reached into the open space with her fingers. She withdrew something wet, something that still moved. Ava's vision blurred. The world tilted. She could feel her heartbeat slowing, syncing with the faint throb from inside the box. Elise leaned close, her lips near Ava's ear. "Now," she whispered, "you'll always be part of me." When Ava's father found her the next morning, she was sitting upright in bed, eyes open, her skin pale and cold. The wooden box lay on her lap, sealed tight, its lace wrapping perfectly neat. He tried to open it once, but the lid wouldn't budge. Eventually, he locked it away in the attic. Years later, after Elise's mysterious disappearance, the police went through the house. They found the box again. When they pried it open, the air inside smelled faintly of roses and smoke. And nestled in the center was a small lock of Elise's hair, tied with a brown ribbon that matched Ava's. The heart still pulsed. Story 5, The Family Photo. When Lucas's mother remarried, he told himself he'd try to be happy for her. She deserved it. After years of quiet dinners, after the long silence that followed his father's death, she finally laughed again. She started wearing perfume in the mornings, humming to herself as she packed lunches. The man she married, Daniel, was polite, well-dressed, with that rehearsed kind of smile adults wear when they want to be liked by children. He moved into their small house on the edge of town with his teenage daughter, Emily. She was a year younger than Lucas, quiet, pale, always staring at her phone. They didn't talk much at first, but Lucas didn't mind. He figured they'd both just have to get used to the new family arrangement. 2 weeks after the wedding, Daniel announced they should commemorate this new beginning with a family photo. Lucas's mother was thrilled by the idea. She ironed matching outfits, called a local photographer, and spent hours fussing with everyone's hair. The photo shoot took place in the backyard, under the old oak tree. The sun was low, the air golden. Lucas remembered standing there with his new family, their shoulders touching, his mother's arm around Daniel's waist. The photographer, a middle-aged man with gray hair and thick glasses, adjusted the lens and said cheerfully, "Say family." Click. That was it. Just one photo. One perfect moment. When the framed picture arrived a week later, his mother hung it above the fireplace with a proud smile. It really was a beautiful photo. His mother's smile was radiant. Daniel looked proud, and Emily's eyes, normally dull and uninterested, seemed bright. But as Lucas stood there staring at it, something in his stomach twisted. His own face looked off somehow. His smile seemed strained, his eyes a little too wide. He leaned in closer. The glass caught the light from the window, creating a faint reflection of the room behind him. For a second, he thought he saw his reflection blink, out of sync with his movements. He blinked again, testing it. His reflection didn't. Lucas stepped back, shaking his head. "Just a trick," he whispered to himself. He turned off the lamp beside the fireplace and went upstairs. That night, he dreamed he was standing in front of the photograph again. Only this time, everyone else in the picture was staring directly at him, smiling. And behind them, in the shadow of the oak tree, a second Lucas stood, mouth open, eyes hollow, screaming soundlessly. He woke up drenched in sweat. The next morning, Lucas tried to ignore it. But the feeling stuck with him all day that something was wrong in that picture. When he got home from school, he walked past the living room and froze. The photograph was tilted slightly. Not much, just enough to make him notice. He straightened it. Then he saw it again. His reflection in the glass wasn't matching his movements. It looked trapped, like it was pressing its face against the other side, mouth open in silent panic. "Mom," he shouted. She came rushing in, startled. "What is it, honey?" He pointed to the photo. "Look. The reflection. It's wrong." His mother frowned, stepping closer. "It's just the lighting, sweetheart. Don't scare me like that." "But no buts. You've been watching too many scary movies." She smiled and ruffled his hair before walking away. Lucas stared at the photo again. His reflection had returned to normal. Over the next week, the house began to feel strange. Emily started acting differently, colder, distracted, like she was listening to something only she could hear. Daniel spent long hours in the basement, claiming he was fixing old storage boxes. And every night, his mother would hum softly as she walked past the photo, sometimes stopping to straighten it with a small, distant smile. Lucas began noticing things out of place. His toys moved, his door cracked open when he was sure he had closed it. At night, he heard faint whispers in the hall, and once, when he got up for water, he saw Emily standing in front of the photo, staring at it in the dark. "What are you doing?" he whispered. She didn't turn. "They move when you're not looking," she said softly. Lucas froze. "What?" She looked at him then. Her face was pale, eyes glassy. The smiles. "They change." Before he could reply, Daniel's voice boomed from upstairs. "Emily. Bed. Now." She walked away without another word. The next morning, Lucas came downstairs to find Daniel polishing the frame of the family photo. His stepfather looked up with a polite grin. "Morning, champ." Lucas nodded cautiously. "Why are you cleaning that?" "Just keeping it nice," Daniel said. "This picture is important. It's proof we're a family now." He tapped the glass lightly. "It keeps us together." Something in his tone made Lucas shiver. That night, Lucas dreamed again. He was back in front of the photograph. Only this time, he was inside it. He could see his mother smiling beside him, Daniel's hand gripping his shoulder tightly. He tried to move, but his limbs wouldn't obey. The world beyond the glass was dim and warped. He could see the living room, see himself standing outside the frame, watching in horror. Then his reflection, the one inside the picture, lifted a hand and placed it flat against the glass, as if begging to be let out. Lucas jolted awake. His sheets were damp with sweat. He ran downstairs. The living room was dark, but the faint light from the fireplace flickered across the photograph. The faces inside looked alive in the shifting glow. He stepped closer, his breath catching when he saw his reflection. It wasn't screaming anymore. It was smiling, wide and forced. "Lucas!" He turned. His mother stood in the doorway, her expression strange, sleepy, but almost expectant. "What are you doing up?" she asked softly. He pointed at the photo. "Mom, there's something wrong with it. I keep seeing." But she cut him off, her voice calm and distant. "You should be asleep." Her eyes flicked toward the frame, then back at him. "Go on, sweetheart. Everything's fine." Something about the way she said it made his stomach twist again. He nodded slowly and went upstairs, but he didn't sleep. The next morning, Lucas found Emily sitting at the kitchen table, pale and trembling. "They want you next," she whispered. He froze. "What are you talking about?" She looked toward the living room. "The picture. It doesn't stay the same. I saw my dad last night. In there. Behind the glass." He was smiling. Her voice broke. "And this morning, I think he's different. He doesn't blink anymore." Lucas swallowed hard. "We need to tell my mom." Emily shook her head violently. "She already knows." Before he could say anything, Daniel entered the room. His face was calm, too calm. "Breakfast," he said cheerfully. "Family should always eat together." They sat in silence as he served pancakes. Lucas tried not to look at him, but every now and then, he caught Daniel glancing toward the living room, toward the photograph. That night, Lucas packed a small bag. He didn't care where he went. He just needed to leave. He waited until the house was silent, then crept downstairs. But when he reached the living room, he stopped cold. The photograph was glowing faintly. He stepped closer. His family's faces looked sharper now, more defined. His mother's smile stretched unnaturally wide. Daniel's eyes gleamed like wet glass, and Emily's head was tilted slightly, her expression frozen mid-blink. Lucas's reflection stood behind them, motionless. Then, as he stared, it slowly lifted its hand and pressed it against the inside of the frame. Lucas stumbled backward. From upstairs, he heard footsteps. He turned to run, but Daniel was standing in the doorway. His eyes were wrong, too dark, too empty. His smile didn't reach his cheeks. "Where are you going, son?" Lucas backed away. "Stay away from me." Daniel took a step closer. "Don't you want to be part of the family?" "Truly part of it." Behind him, his mother appeared, her expression eerily calm. "It's time," she whispered. The room darkened, the air thick and heavy. Lucas felt a pull, a strange gravity dragging him toward the photograph. The faces inside shifted, the glass rippling like water. He screamed, trying to fight it, but Daniel's hand gripped his shoulder, tight, impossibly strong, and shoved him forward. For a split second, Everything went white. Weeks later, the police entered the house after a neighbor reported the family missing. The kitchen table was still set for breakfast. The beds were made. Everything was spotless, silent, lifeless. On the mantel above the fireplace, they found a single framed photograph. 5 smiling faces, frozen mid-laugh. The glass had cracked slightly down the middle, but the image was otherwise pristine. The officers couldn't explain the faint warmth they felt when they touched the frame, or why the eyes in the photo seemed to follow them as they left the room. That night, the photo was placed into evidence storage. The lights in the room flickered. The camera monitoring the shelves caught a brief movement, just a flicker, but when reviewed, it showed something impossible. The faces in the photograph had shifted. The 5th figure, the boy who had been smiling in the back, was now standing front and center. And this time, he was the one smiling the widest.